For more of this kind of content, you can subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. The signal was bait, and the relics would come. From the command amphitheater, the coalition watched the falsified SOS bloom across the tactical sphere, a thin, desperate pulse encoded to trigger primitive rescue instincts, and the 9 banners of the imperial species hung in a precise arc above it, each admiral already certain of the outcome. They had refined this ritual for centuries. A weak civilization cried out. A Deathworld species, if it still existed, rushed in loud and uncoordinated. Then processing began. The humans of Earth were listed in the archives as marginal survivors. From a high-gravity rock, biologically inefficient, socially fractious, technologically inelegant. Their expansion stalled and their fleets categorized as relic tier. The Council's analysts quoted the file without irony. Unsuitable for integration, optimal for early removal. The admiral of the third species gestured, and the hologram annotated itself. 1 SOS source, 1 projected human response vector. 0 allied support. The ambush geometry locked in with ceremonial slowness, 63 vessels concealed beyond sensor shadow, 3 command ships holding the kill lattice, 6 interdiction rings calibrated to collapse inward once the prey crossed the threshold. Energy reserves were full, weapons were warm. The coalition allowed itself 27 minutes of quiet confidence while the signal propagated, counting down the time it would take Earth to decide it could not afford to ignore a cry for help. Deathworlders do not resist instinct, one voice said, translated cleanly across species. They charge. A ripple of approval moved through the chamber. Humans were discussed as an abstraction, not an opponent. Their hulls were described as thick because their metallurgy was crude. Their weapons were kinetic because their science lagged. Their psychology was deemed unstable because it had been shaped by constant predation. All of it, the coalition believed, made them predictable. Processing would be efficient. The surviving population would be redistributed. The system would be cleansed. They had done this to dozens of worlds. They had numbers to prove it. A junior tactician flagged the first data return. The humans had acknowledged the signal. No flourish, no ritual phrasing. A simple receipt time-stamped 27 minutes after broadcast, matching the model within 0.3%. The amphitheater filled with soft amusement. Even their response time was ordinary. The archivists updated the prediction curves and pushed them to the displays, casualty estimates rendered in pale blue bands that assumed panic, fragmentation, and surrender within minutes of first contact. Relics worth processing, the Admiral said, and the phrase was logged as doctrine. A thin line appeared on the edge of the tactical sphere as human drives flared at extreme distance, a single, vector at first, then several, their signatures heavy and unsophisticated, burning hard instead of slipping between frames like civilized fleets. The coalition read it as confirmation. Excess thrust wasted on bravado, armor instead of shields, mass instead of finesse, primitive ships, primitive minds. Another tactician noted the absence of negotiation pings. The humans had not requested terms, nor acknowledged the coalition's presence beyond the receipt. It was marked as cultural deficiency rather than intent. The interdiction rings tightened by fractions of a degree. Weapons officers began the formal arming sequence, confident enough to follow the ritual to the letter. They are coming to die. The Admiral leaned back as the countdown reached its final minutes, satisfied that the archives would soon close another file, unaware that the humans were not responding to a cry for mercy at all, but to a signal that, by doctrine, it meant hunt-authorized. Earth did not answer with the words they expected. The coalition transmitted first, as ritual demanded, a layered hail encoded with dominance markers and submission pathways, offering the humans a narrow corridor of compliance that would end in controlled disarmament and processing. The signal carried weight and history. Lesser species had broken under it in seconds. The command amphitheater waited for fear, for bargaining, for the familiar stutter of a civilization realizing it had already lost. What came back was a receipt. A single, flat acknowledgement arrived exactly 31 seconds after the hail completed. stamped with the same identifier as the original SOS, and nothing else. No posture markers, no deference keys, just confirmation that the signal had been received, logged, and acted upon. The translation engines hesitated, then resolved it into a statement so plain it unsettled the room. The humans had not responded to the coalition at all. They had responded to the distress call. A second transmission followed, narrowband and direct, its carrier strong enough to override the ritual lattice without brute force. The voice was unadorned, neither elevated nor rushed, speaking as if to an equal rather than a superior. It did not introduce a leader. It did not request clarification. It did not ask permission. It stated time and intent with the same economy. "Is the receipt?" Signal confirmed, the human voice said. "Response in progress." Several admirals spoke at once, their objections overlapping in irritation. The humans were instructed, formally, to halt, to identify themselves properly, to submit to inspection protocols established by 9 sovereign species. The ritual demanded a pause here, a chance for the prey to bow. The human channel remained open, silent for 2.4 seconds, long enough to be measured, not long enough to be uncertainty. Then the voice returned. "We do not participate in submission rituals," it said. "We do not request transit permission in response to distress." A stinger of irritation cut through the chamber. The archivists flagged the phrase as non-compliant. Cultural instability, they noted, matched the file. Still, procedure required escalation. A warning package was prepared, outlining consequences in exacting detail. Interdiction, neutralization, processing timelines measured in hours. The humans listened without interruption. The coalition mistook silence for intimidation. When the reply came, it carried numbers. "Your vessels are inside the response envelope," the human said. "We are 18 minutes from contact at current burn. Altering course is no longer relevant. Do not negotiate." The admiral of the third species leaned forward, displeased now, and authorized a final directive, the one that had broken stronger wills than this. It named the humans prey. It named their extinction a matter of administrative efficiency. It offered survival to those who complied immediately. The human answer arrived before the directive finished transmitting, as if it had been anticipated. "We acknowledge your presence," the voice said. "We acknowledge hostile intent." A fractional pause followed, deliberate. "We are not here to be rescued. We are here because someone used an SOS." A map bloomed across coalition displays, overlaid by human telemetry they had not consented to receive. Vectors, distances, closing rates, numbers updated in real time. The humans were not slowing. This is not a request. "We will secure the source," the voice concluded. "We will stop interference. Any resistance will be treated as participation." The channel closed. No flourish, no threat, just a statement placed like a final datum. The admiral realized, too late, that Earth had not come to speak. It had come to act. The coalition fired to restore the shape of the universe. The order went out clean and unanimous. Energy lances blooming from 63 vessels in a pattern perfected through centuries of uncontested dominance. Each beam tuned to shear shields, ionize armor, and induce cascading failure in anything built by lesser minds. The amphitheater dimmed, its power routed to weapons, and the admirals watched with practiced detachment, already shifting attention to projected debris fields and processing windows. This was the correction phase. This was where certainty returned. The first impacts struck human hulls at 4.2 million kilometers. Light flared, sensors screamed, and nothing else happened. Data poured in, dense and fast, forcing the archivists to slow the feed to understand it. The beams were not deflected, they were not evaded, they were absorbed, bled into layered mass and spaced volumes that drank heat and radiation without catastrophic transfer. Human ships did not flash and fail. They darkened, radiators blooming like deliberate scars, excess energy vented in controlled plumes. Damage registers climbed, then stabilized. No loss of thrust, no loss of vector integrity, 1% hull. Ablation. 2! Then flat! Fire again, an admiral snapped, irritation cutting through composure. The second volley adjusted frequency and phase, weapons officers recalibrating in real time, certain that the first exchange had simply struck an edge case. This time the beams bit deeper, carving molten channels across human armor, but still the ships held formation. Still their burns did not waver. The humans neither scattered nor returned fire. They continued to close, drive steady, signatures unchanged. Numbers replaced confidence. Efficiency dropped to 38%, a tactician reported, disbelief slipping into the translation. Thermal dissipation exceeding models. The coalition fired a third time. The ritual was breaking now, cadence speeding as doctrine bent under pressure. The energy washed over the human line and came apart, fields collapsing into harmless spill, as if the ships had been built to expect exactly this punishment. Internal sensors showed rerouted loads, sacrificial layers sloughing away, systems isolating damage faster than command oversight could track. The humans were not enduring the fire. They were managing it. Weapons ineffective. A single human transmission cut in, not as taunt but as data, piggybacked on the sensor returns the coalition was already drowning in. It displayed a rolling tally, energy input versus structural loss, plotted in real time, annotated with margins, 92% absorbed, 7% vented, 1% permanent damage. The amphitheater went quiet. "Cease fire," someone said, too late to sound authoritative. The order propagated unevenly, a symptom the EE systems flagged but could not yet explain. The humans were still not firing back. They were measuring. They were letting the coalition exhaust its assumptions. Another volley struck, this one ragged, out of sync. The humans did not respond. Their line held. Their closing rate increased by a fraction, a change small enough to be intentional. Fire. Without effect. For the first time, the casualty projections vanished from the displays, replaced by red uncertainty bands that widened with every second of sustained human advance. The admirals stared at the numbers, at the calm refusal of reality to conform, and felt something unfamiliar creep into the chamber. If this was what primitive defenses looked like, then the archives were wrong. The humans changed speed, and the battle changed shape. Without warning, flare or announcement, their drives deepened in pitch. A subtle shift that the coalition's sensors almost dismissed as noise until vectors began to bend in ways doctrine said were impossible. The human ships did not surge forward in a reckless charge. They rebalanced mass, redistributed thrust, and then held a sustained 14G burn as if it were ordinary cruise. The distance between fleets collapsed from millions of kilometers to tactical relevance in minutes, not hours, the closing rate rewriting every engagement table the coalition relied on. 14G, sustained. The interdiction rings reacted too, late. Their geometry had been designed to trap fleets that obeyed comfort limits, that flinched under acceleration and spread out to preserve crews. The humans did neither. They stayed tight, formations compressing instead of scattering, hulls aligned to minimize cross-section as they threaded through gaps that should not have existed. Coalition vessels attempted to pivot, to re-establish firing arcs, but timing betrayed them. Every correction lagged by fractions of a second that compounded into fatal misalignment. This is not pursuit. Tactical displays devolved into chaos as human icons overlapped projected kill zones without triggering them, slipping between envelopes that assumed sane acceleration curves. One ring collapsed entirely when its anchor ships found themselves on intersecting vectors, their own avoidance maneuvers breaking formation discipline. Another ring fragmented as captains overcorrected, trusting automation that had never been trained against sustained 14G geometry. The humans were not faster in the simple sense, they were earlier. They arrived at future positions before the coalition finished reacting to the present. The amphitheater filled with shouted adjustments, commands stepping on each other as admirals demanded order that no longer mapped to the display. A tactician reported the numbers in a voice gone thin. Closing to 120,000 kilometers in under 9 minutes. Enemy vectors stable. No deceleration. Human ships began to slide past the edges of the coalition formation, not yet firing, forcing hard choices with nothing more than presence. Vessels turned to face the threat and exposed flanks. Others held course and found humans suddenly behind them, angles inverted, weapon arcs useless. The coalition's strength, layered, ritualized coverage, became its weakness as geometry turned against it. Formation integrity down 22%. A human transmission ghosted through the noise, not a broadcast, but a shared datum injected into the tactical layer. It showed projected paths for the next 300 seconds, clean lines arcing through the coalition's tangled vectors. The implication landed harder than any threat. The humans were not improvising. They had already solved this phase. They are inside. Our timing. Some captains attempted emergency burns, spiking acceleration beyond safe limits to escape the encroaching net. Their ships shuddered, crews blacked out, and the maneuvers only widened the gaps humans exploited. Others froze, clinging to doctrine that no longer applied. The humans did not punish either choice yet. They continued to close, 14G unwavering, as if inviting the coalition to watch its own formation collapse. The first human vessels crossed the line where energy weapons had been calibrated to dominate, slipping beneath optimal ranges and rendering previous exchanges meaningless. Coalition sensors struggled to track targets moving across multiple axes at once, their solutions lagging behind reality by growing margins. Doctrines fail when timing fails. By the time the admirals realized the humans had maneuvered them into overlapping fields of fire that pointed nowhere useful, the geometry was already locked. The coalition's formation was no longer a weapon. It was a liability, slowly folding under the calm pressure of ships that treated 14G not as a limit, but as a tool. The humans fired when the numbers closed. There was no broadside, no roar of unleashed fury, just a sequence of events that unfolded with mechanical calm once the geometry resolved into certainty. Railgun capacitors discharged across the human line, kinetic rounds leaving their barrels at fractions of light speed, invisible until impact, because nothing moving that fast announced itself. Coalition sensors registered the launches only as sudden absences in predicted future states, solutions collapsing as reality jumped ahead. The first command ship ceased to exist 0.6 seconds later. A slug punched through its forward hull, ignored, it layered shielding entirely, and converted mass to debris in a straight line that bisected the vessel from prow to core. The ship did not explode. It failed, systems blinking out as structural integrity vanished, the carcass tumbling end over, and casualty estimates updated automatically. Command neutralized, crew loss total. A number, logged and closed. Kill confirmed. Missiles followed, launched in disciplined packets, each salvo numbered and assigned. They did not swarm randomly. They arrived on intersecting vectors timed to the millisecond, warheads detonating not for spectacle but for effect, shaped nuclear charges blooming inside optimal envelopes where shields overlapped poorly. The second command ship tried to maneuver, drives flaring in a desperate burn, but the humans had already accounted for it. 3 missiles adjusted course by degrees so small they barely registered, and the detonation occurred exactly where the model predicted. The ship's spine folded. Power died. Silence replaced command chatter across coalition channels. The amphitheater watched counters tick upward. 10 hostile vessels neutralized. 12, 18. Each update landed like a measured strike, the SOS, absence of drama making it worse. The humans were not pressing an advantage. They were executing a plan. A third command ship attempted surrender protocols mid-volley, broadcasting compliance codes as its escorts scattered. The human response came before the codes finished cycling. A single railgun round, timed between missile impacts, punched through the bridge section and ended coordination instantly. The rest of the vessel drifted, intact but leaderless, its weapons falling silent as automated safeties tripped. The humans did not finish it. They moved on. No command remains. Coalition ships died in dozens after that, not all destroyed, many simply rendered inert. Drives shredded. Weapon mounts slagged, power cores isolated and shut down by precision strikes that left hulls floating and crews alive. Human fire walked across the formation in deliberate patterns, collapsing resistance pockets and leaving corridors of wreckage where formations had been moments before. Hostile count reduced to 63 neutralized, a human voice reported internally. The statement later intercepted and translated. Engagement time since first shot, 4:12 seconds. The numbers were not boasts, they were accounting. Some coalition captains fired wildly in response, energy weapons lashing out at targets already, past optimal range. Others ceased fire entirely, stunned by the speed at which certainty had evaporated. Human ships adjusted calmly, railguns cycling, missile racks emptying in clean sequences, each shot tied to a projected outcome that resolved exactly as predicted. Erasure is arithmetic. By the time the coalition understood the pattern, it was too late to break it. Human fire did not seek glory kills. It sought thresholds. Once a vessel crossed the line from threat to non-threat, the humans ignored it. Once resistance clustered, they cut it apart. 30 ships were gone. Then 40, then more, the counters climbing with relentless neutrality. Amid the destruction, a human transmission cut through, broadcast wide and clear, timed to land as the last command ship's signature faded. "Cease resistance," the voice said. "Further escalation will remove all maneuvering options." The message was not followed by another volley. The humans paused, weapons hot, positions dominant, waiting to see who understood what the numbers now meant. The humans stopped firing while they still held every advantage. Weapons went quiet across their line, railgun capacitors idling, missile bays sealed, targeting solutions maintained but unfired. The pause itself rippled through the shattered coalition formation more violently than another strike would have. Drifted hulks spun slowly. Damaged ships bled heat and atmosphere. Crews waited for the next impact that did not come. Timers stretched. Fear recalculated. Then the broadcast began. It was not narrowband. It was not addressed only to the surviving coalition vessels. The signal propagated outward, riding relays and spillover channels, pushed deliberately into civilian bands and neutral monitoring arrays. Anyone watching the engagement received it. Anyone who had ever used an SOS received it. The human voice returned, unchanged by victory. Calm, flat, measured. "This response is governed by doctrine," it said. "We are stating it once." A pause followed. "Exactly. Long enough to ensure translation buffers caught up. There is no lawful category called processing," the voice continued. "There is no recognized right to harvest populations. Slavery is a crime. Extermination for convenience is a crime. Using emergency signals as bait is a crime." Coalition officers listened in disbelief as the words propagated, stripped of ritual, stripped of negotiation. This was not a threat declaration. It was a legal frame being imposed mid-battle. "Surrender is permitted," the voice said. "Surrender is protected. Vessels that power down weapons, cut drives, and comply with boarding instructions will not be fired upon." Numbers appeared. Alongside the words on shared displays, conditions rendered as simple checklists rather than appeals. Cut power. Hold position. Open channels. Time windows were specified in seconds, margins tight but achievable. "Those taken into custody will be tried," the voice continued. "Trials will account for command responsibility, compliance will be recorded, harm to prisoners will not occur." A stinger cut through the silence. This is the price of signals. Across the coalition, captains argued in overlapping channels. Some rejected the broadcast outright, clinging to the idea that this pause was a trick, that mercy was a feint before annihilation. Others stared at their damage readouts and the cold clarity of the numbers. 3 command ships gone. 63 neutralized. 14G geometry still holding the human line in dominant position. The humans did not press. They waited. "We are not escalating," the voice said, as if answering the unspoken fear. "We are concluding." The implication landed heavily. Escalation was still available. This restraint was optional, conditional, and temporary. A timer appeared on coalition displays, injected without permission, 90 seconds, counting down, not an ultimatum. an administrative boundary. Some ships powered down immediately, drives spooling to zero, weapons safeties engaging as crews chose survival over doctrine. Others hesitated, frozen between old certainty and new reality. A handful attempted to maneuver, only to find human targeting solutions tighten without a single shot fired. The humans recorded every response. "This broadcast will remain archived," the voice concluded. "Future encounters will be judged against it." The channel stayed open, weapons stayed silent. The humans held the field not with fire, but with terms, making clear to every system listening that Earth did not answer SOS calls for gratitude, but it enforced consequences when they were abused. The realization spread quietly, carried by survivors rather than fire. As human boarding craft moved in disciplined lines, attaching to compliant vessels with mechanical certainty, prisoners began to compare notes across open channels the humans did not bother to silence. There was no chaos in the boarding actions, no looting, no shouting. Crews were secured, injuries treated, weapons catalogued and removed with the same calm efficiency that had erased command ships minutes earlier. The humans behaved as if this phase mattered as much as the killing. Observers watching from neutral arrays noticed it first. The humans were not improvising victory. Every step unfolded, as if rehearsed, checklists clicking forward in perfect sequence. Medical teams arrived within 90 seconds of hull breach. Legal identifiers were assigned before names were requested. Evidence drones tagged consoles, logs, and biometric data with timestamps precise to the millisecond. This was not mercy born of emotion. It was procedure. A captured coalition officer said it aloud, disbelief roughening the translation. They expected this. The truth settled in pieces. Human ships carried boarding complements sized not for conquest, but for mass surrender. Their data cores held translation matrices for dozens of species, some of which the coalition had believed unknown beyond the rim. Their doctrine packets referenced contingencies tied to SOS misuse, complete with escalation thresholds, surrender windows, and post-conflict governance protocols. None of it looked recent. File headers dated back centuries. Preparation was the point. A human officer addressed a holding bay without ceremony, speaking to prisoners seated in ordered rows. "Emergency signals are treated as hostile environments until proven otherwise," she said. "Response units train for worst-case scenarios. That includes ambush, civilian harm, and false distress." She did not raise her voice. She did not threaten. She stated facts as policy. One prisoner asked why such effort existed, why an entire civilization would shape itself around answering calls that might be traps. The officer paused for 1.2 seconds, then answered. "Because abandoning a real signal costs lives," she said, "and letting predators exploit them costs more." The observers recorded that line and replayed it across networks. Logs recovered from coalition command wreckage confirmed the scale of miscalculation. Humans had simulated this exact ambush geometry thousands of times. 9 species coalitions, ritualized dominance structures, energy-first doctrines. Their 14G tolerance was not bravado but baseline. Crews conditioned from early training to function under loads that would kill most species. Loss models assumed casualties and accounted for them without hesitation. They did not fear violence. They budgeted it. A stinger rippled through the channels as the implication became unavoidable. This was not a rescue gone wrong. This was a response system. As the last resistant pockets were secured without further shots, observers noted a final, unsettling detail. The humans were already archiving the encounter, tagging it as a case study, cross-referencing it against older incidents with similar markers. The coalition was not unique. It was iteration. Prisoners understood then that Earth had not risen suddenly into competence. It had been refining this edge quietly, across generations, waiting for signals it hoped were real and prepared for those that were not. And somewhere in human space, the doctrine that governed this battle was already being reviewed, not to celebrate the victory, but to improve the next response. The collapse did not come as a charge, but as a sequence. Once the doctrine timer expired, The humans resumed motion with the same calm that had defined every prior phase, shifting from restraint to completion without ceremony. Targeting solutions tightened across the remaining coalition vessels, not to destroy them all, but to remove choice. Drives were tagged first, precise kinetic strikes punching through propulsion housings and leaving ships dead in space without breaching habitats. Weapon mounts followed, slagged in patterns that preserved internal pressure while stripping offensive. Capability. The humans were not fighting resistance now. They were neutralizing inventory. This is the cascade. Boarding craft launched in waves, not massed, each assigned to a specific hull already rendered compliant by geometry and fire. They moved through debris fields with practiced ease, threading between drifting wrecks and powerless ships as if the battlefield were a mapped corridor rather than a ruin. Timers updated across shared channels. 90 seconds to first latch, 60 to breach, 30 to secure primary compartments. Coalition captains watched the numbers and broke. Surrenders multiplied not through persuasion, but arithmetic. Each powered down, ship reduced the options of those still holding out, shrinking maneuver space and expanding the human envelope. Some captains attempted last-second burns, only to have drives fail under precisely timed hits that left them coasting helplessly. Others fired once, twice, then stopped as return fire erased only what was necessary to silence them. No wasted shots. Within 4 minutes, resistance collapsed into isolated pockets, clusters of ships clinging to old doctrine out of habit rather than hope. Humans addressed them individually, boarding teams adjusting loadouts mid-approach based on species, atmosphere, and interior geometry already catalogued in their systems. The speed was unsettling. There was no scramble, no raised voices, no improvisation visible from the outside. A coalition frigate attempted to self-destruct rather than submit. A human interceptor altered course by a fraction of a degree and fired. A single round that cored the reactor containment ring without triggering cascade. The ship went dark, intact, its crew stunned but alive. Boarding followed immediately. The message was clear without being spoken. Destruction is optional. By the 6th minute, the surrender counter spiked sharply. Ships powered down in batches, crews transmitting compliance codes and holding position as instructed. Human craft slid into place beside them, matching drift, extending clamps and umbilicals with mechanical grace. The battlefield filled with paired silhouettes, predator and prey frozen together, motionless except for the slow rotation of wreckage around them. A human internal report, later intercepted, summarized the phase in 8 words. Cascade, complete. Residual resistance approaching 0. One last pocket fired blindly, energy lances flaring in desperation. Human ships absorbed the hits without altering vector, then responded with a coordinated strike that removed weapons across the entire cluster in under 3 seconds. No hulls breached, no lives lost beyond those already counted. The pocket surrendered as one, channels opening in overlapping confusion. Count it. Observers marked the time from escalation resumption to total collapse. 287 seconds, fewer than 5 minutes. The coalition that had once measured victories in systems and species now existed as wreckage, prisoners, and archived data. Human ships held position afterward, weapons cooling, boarding actions continuing with steady rhythm. Medical. Shuttles moved between hulls, triaging without regard for species or allegiance. Evidence drones catalogued everything, firing sequences, compliance timestamps, command decisions. The humans were not savoring dominance. They were closing a file, a final stinger cut through the silence. Neutralization is not annihilation, say. The last compliant ship was secured. A human broadcast went out on the same wide channels as before, quieter now, almost administrative. All hostile forces in the response envelope have been neutralized. Boarding and custody operations ongoing. No further resistance observed. There was no cheer, no declaration of triumph. Just a statement of state. The battlefield drifted, silent, except for the low hum of human engines holding 14G capability in reserve, unnecessary now, but ready. Beyond the debris, sensors already reached outward, mapping secondary threats, checking for reinforcements that did not come. The cascade had ended, not because the humans ran out of firepower, but because there was nothing left that could meaningfully resist. Silence settled, and the humans treated it as a phase, not an ending. With resistance reduced to zero, custody operations expanded methodically across the field. Prisoners were transferred, ship by ship, escorted through pressure locks into controlled environments calibrated for their physiology. Restraints were visible but humane. Wounds were stabilized within minutes. Medical readouts replaced threat, indicators on shared displays, red turning to amber, then green, as lives were preserved with the same precision that had ended the fight. No one was processed. Human officers spoke in plain terms, repeating conditions already broadcast, ensuring comprehension across translation layers. Names were taken after. Injuries were addressed. Ranks were recorded without ceremony. Command responsibility was logged first, then passed down the chain with clinical clarity. Evidence drones followed every step, tagging interactions, preserving context. The prisoners noticed the pattern and began to understand that survival here was not charity. It was policy. Trials were scheduled. A human legal brief circulated openly, outlining procedures with numbered sections and timestamps. Jurisdiction, charges, rights. The document made no reference to vengeance. It spoke of accountability and repair. Coalition captains who had ordered processing operations saw their names highlighted, decisions cross-referenced against casualty logs. Others, lower in the hierarchy, were informed of witness protections and reduced liability contingent. On cooperation, the law moved with weight because it had structure. Observers beyond the battlefield felt the pull. Neutral systems that had watched from a distance began transmitting quiet inquiries, requests for clarification framed as technical questions. What constituted lawful surrender? How were prisoners treated? What happened to worlds previously harvested? The humans answered all of it, publicly, with numbers attached. Time frames, oversight bodies, enforcement limits. Nothing hidden behind ritual. The Coalition's myth began to die in real time. It had claimed inevitability, presenting itself as the natural order, predators at the top of an unquestioned hierarchy. That image collapsed under footage of command, ships erased in seconds, and prisoners treated with care afterward. The contrast spread faster than fear ever had. Systems that had paid tribute quietly recalculated. Some cut transmissions to Coalition remnants entirely. Others announced provisional alignment with Earth's doctrine within hours, citing the broadcast as precedent. Political gravity shifted. A stinger moved through the networks as analysts summarized the outcome in a single line. Predators can be tried. Within 12 hours, 3 peripheral systems declared withdrawal from Coalition compacts, freezing assets, and opening their archives to human investigators. Another announced amnesty for enslaved populations and requested oversight. The humans acknowledged each message without fanfare, logging them as downstream effects rather than victories. On the field, the last prisoners were secured, their vessels tagged and towed. Human ships began reconfiguring, some transitioning, to escort roles, others to data relay and humanitarian support. The 14G capability that had defined the battle was no longer displayed, but it remained implicit, an understood constant, rather than a threat. A human officer closed the operational loop with a brief transmission. "Custody complete," she said. "No further hostilities recorded. There was no celebration, no speeches, just the quiet work of ending a war properly." As the debris was cleared and the survivors accounted for, the Coalition ceased to exist. As a coherent force, its authority undone not only by defeat, but by exposure. The galaxy had watched certainty fail, seen power paired with restraint, and adjusted its orbits accordingly. Silence remained, but now it belonged to Earth. One signal slipped the net. It was detected 38 seconds after transmission. A narrow burst. Riding debris, scatter, and civilian noise. Weak enough to evade priority filters, and strong enough to matter. Human analysts flagged it without urgency, logged the vector, and traced its origin to a Coalition relay that had died moments later. The packet contained no plea, no threat, no ritualized defiance. It carried a warning compressed into efficient symbols and sent outward at maximum range. Do not answer their calls. The message propagated into the dark beyond the rim, bouncing through old routes and forgotten infrastructure, reaching places the coalition had never governed but had always assumed would remain quiet. The humans archived it, marked it as the final hostile action of the engagement, and moved on. For them, the case was closing. Elsewhere, it opened something old. Far beyond the mapped response envelope, beyond trade lanes and monitored arrays, an automated system received the packet and matched it against dormant criteria. Deathworld signature, confirmed. Sustained 14G maneuvering logged. Energy absorption margins exceeded threshold. Command neutralization within 412 seconds. Mercy doctrine broadcast post-dominance. The flags aligned one by one, cold and indifferent. An ancient protocol woke. It did not think in terms of fear or pride. It calculated extinction events as maintenance. Long ago, it had learned that Deathworld species that paired violence with law did not remain local problems. They reorganized regions. They broke hierarchies. They attracted followers. The safest response, the algorithm concluded, was early and overwhelming. Activation authorization cascaded through systems older than most stars in human charts. Fleets were not launched yet. That would come later. First came observation, mapping, pattern, confirmation. The protocol did not rush. It had erased civilizations that burned brighter than this by waiting until they believed themselves secure. On the human side of the rim, the aftermath continued without drama. Prisoners were transferred. Data was reviewed. The doctrine that governed SOS responses was updated with marginal notes and minor refinements. The escape transmission was cited once, briefly, then filed. A human analyst paused over the long-range sensor feed, noting a faint anomaly at the edge of detection, too distant to classify, too regular to dismiss. She logged it for follow-up, and moved on to the next task. Earth did not celebrate. It prepared. The warning that escaped did not bring retaliation. It brought attention. And somewhere in the dark, something that had ended Deathworlds before adjusted its models, not with anger, but with interest, having finally confirmed that humanity was exactly what the protocol had been designed to erase.